Welcome! Waterfall charts, they show the change in an item's value between 2 points. In Power BI, the default for waterfall charts is to show a running total. But in finance, sometimes a user would prefer to see the movement in value between 2 points in time. In this video, I am going to take some basic finance data and show you one way you could create a month-on-month comparison. Let's head over to Power BI. I have a small data set here. It only consists of 5 columns and is only containing the information for 2021. So we have a date column, income column, and then we have 3 types of costs, being insurance, food and electricity. We are going to show the movement month on month in income and expenses. For the costs, I want to be able to filter the waterfall to show the trend in each individual cost as well as the total cost. If I only wanted to see the total cost, then this project would be so much easier. In a real life scenario, you're probably going to have more than just a waterfall chart on a page. You're probably going to have a lot more income and expenses as well. So you might be looking to manipulate data in other ways. Therefore, before we begin doing anything, we're going to set up a date table. Back in Report View, I'm going to go to Modelling and I'm going to select New Table. I'm going to call my table Dates. And we're going to say it equals, and then we're going to create a calendar. And we want our calendar to start at the first date in our data set. So the minimum of finance date. And then we want to end it at the maximum. So we're just going to put maximum finance date. And then close off both our brackets and press the tick mark. And that's our date table set up. Nice and simple. We're now going to transform our data to help us when we come to look at the trend for each type of expense. On the Home tab, let's click Transform Data, Transform Data. We need to bring all our costs into one column. And in doing that, we will also need to bring the income into that same column. If we don't bring the income in as well, for this example, what would happen is that income will then end up being shown 3 times because you would end up with date, income, then say electricity, and then you would end up with date, income, then food. What we're going to do is if you highlight the date column, then we go to the Transform tab. In the Unpivot column section, we click the drop down and select Unpivot Other Columns. We now have just 3 columns in our data set. I'm going to rename attribute to be income / costs. I'm going to leave value as value. And then all I'm going to do is do close and apply. I'm now going to go to the Relationship tab on the left-hand side. And I am going to create a connection now between finances and dates, given that we've done our data manipulation in finances. To do this, all I need to do is click on date and drag it on top of date in dates table. We go back to our report view. And on our first page, I'm going to change the title of the page to be income because I'm going to have a separate page for income and a separate page for expenses. As we only have income on this page, I am going to filter out the other expenses so that we don't have to filter it out per diagram. To do that, if we go to income and costs and click and drag it into the filters on this page section, and then we just tick income. If we go back to our data set, you will see that there are 2020 figures appearing. Now we need the 2020 figures for when we come to create our waterfall to show our January movement. However, we don't want 2020 appearing in any of our diagrams. And we want that to be the case for all pages in our report. So if we go back to our report view and we go up to dates, we drop down the hierarchy, and then we click and drag year into the filters on all pages box. And I am going to tick the basic filtering and only select 2021. Now we finally get to our waterfall stage. Okay, so at the moment, if you click on a waterfall diagram from the visualizations pane to create a waterfall on the canvas, we want in our waterfall for the month to be across the bottom. So we go to our dates table and we are going to drag month into category column. And then we want to see the values. So we click the value in the finance table and drag it into the values box. If we make our waterfall a bit bigger, you can see that it's showing a running total of income per month. And we want to change that to being month on month. To aid me with a sense check as I create our month on month movement, I'm going to put a table onto the page. So click on table. Then again, we want to pull in month from the dates table and we want to pull in value from the finance table. Remember, we've filtered out costs already, so it should only be income which comes in here. We are going to create a new measure to hold the sum of our income. So to do that, we go across to the three dots, new measure in our finance table. And we're going to call our measure total income equals calculate the sum of the values. We need to filter it. And it's the finances table we're filtering, comma, we put in the name of the column. So it's finances, income costs, where it equals income. We have to make sure that our income is between double quotes, close it, and then we need to close off our opening bracket away across here. So we need another bracket, then click the tick mark. Let's see if that's worked. We're going to drag the new measure and put it into our table. So make sure your table's selected before you drag the measure. That looks good. We've got the right total. Then we're going to create a new measure to hold our prior month income. So we're going to say prior month income equals calculate, and then we want to still be able to sum up the values. So we're going to say total income, comma, and then we're going to use parallel period. And we're going to say dates, date, dot date, comma, then -1, comma, month. So here we're saying we still want to calculate our total income, but in this case, when calculating our total income, we want to go back, which is why you've got -1, 1 month. Let's see what happens here. Again, with your table still selected, drag your new measure into the table so that we can see whether or not we've got our correct figures. If we have a look at the table, our income in January was 5,000, our prior month is 5,000, February 5,050. When we come to March, our previous month income was 5,050. So all looks good to me. Now we just need to create one more measure because we are interested in the movement between total income and our prior month income. So click again to create a new measure. I'm going to call this income movement. And I'm going to say it equals our total income minus our prior month income. So total income minus prior month income. And again, with the table selected, I'm going to click and drag my new measure into the table. I will do a quick sense check to make sure our figures look correct. So if we have total income in January, prior month was 4900, so we'd expect a movement of 100, which is what we have. Looking at it in another way, we had total income of 5,000 here. Come the next month, we had a total of 5,050, so we would expect a movement of 50, and we have a movement of 50. So regardless of which way we do our sense check, it looks like our figures are correct. Let's now create our waterfall. Click on a new waterfall diagram, and into the fields, we again are going to go to the dates table and drag in month into the category. And this time into the values, we are going to drag our movement. So if we go to income movement, drag it in, there we go. Now we can see our movements in each month. I'm not a fan here of having a total because we are looking at movements, not the overall total for the period. So what I'm going to do is go to the roller sign in the visualizations pane, click on that, and I am going to go to y-axis and scroll down and turn show total to off. We no longer need this diagram, so let's just remove it from our view, and we will drag this one across and our table across, make it look a bit better. I like to put borders around things. So let's put a border. Now, if we have a look at our diagram, we can see that we've got an increase in 100 in January, which is what we expect. We've also got an increase in February of 50. Come March, we have a decrease of 550, and again, our diagram shows that. So it looks like our diagram has worked. That's excellent. The next thing to consider is the user. Will the colours make sense to the user? In this case, because we're using income, it is usually seen to be a good thing to be increasing income and more of a negative thing if income has decreased. So here we have got our increases in green and our reductions in red. Therefore, from a finance point of view, that probably does make sense to leave the colours as they are. Let's now head over and do the same for expenses. I'm going to create a new tab. Call it expenses. Again, we don't want to see our income, so all I'm going to do is drag income and costs into filters for this page. I'm going to select all and then deselect income. All we now need to do is create our waterfall. Again, as our starting point, I'm just going to create a default waterfall. Into it, we want the month across the bottom, so drag that into category from the dates table, and we want a value in our values field. And as you can see, for our waterfall, we've got our cumulative position. We are going to change that to month on month, and we also want to build in the trend for each cost. To help us again with a sense check, we are going to set up a table, but this time we're going to use the matrix one. We will drag month into rows, and then into rows we're actually going to drag income and costs as well. And into values, we will drag values. If we click on the drop down under January, we can see our breakdown of our costs for that month. Now we're going to make life easy for ourselves because we are going to reuse the measures that we used for income. So the first thing we're going to do is create our total expenses. To do that, first of all, click on total income. We are going to copy our total income code. We're going to set up a new measure. And we're going to paste that code in. And then we just make some minor changes to it. So rather than saying income, I'm going to change that to expenses. And the only other small change I need to make is where it says equals income across here. I no longer want it to equal income. We want to say does not equal income. And to do that in DAX, it's just 2 angle brackets. So we open and close it and then press return. With our table still selected, we're going to make sure our measure has worked. So click and drag it into our table, into the values section. Looks good to me. Let's now do our movement in expenses for the month. So again, we're going to click on prior month income. We're going to copy it. We're going to create a new measure. And we're going to paste it in. And then we're going to call it prior month expenses. And it's calculate total expenses now. And we still want to go back a month, so we need to change nothing else in our code. So just click the tick button. Again, with the table still selected, we're going to click and drag our new measure into our values section to make sure it's worked. And that looks good. In January we had 480, in February we now have 480, 630 in February, 630 in March. So that looks good to us. Next, we need to just create our movement. So again, we're going to copy and paste. We go to income movement measure. We're going to copy it. We are going to set up a new measure and we're going to paste it in. Where we see income, we just change it to expense. Expenses. Prior month expenses. Again, with the table selected, we're just going to make sure that our measure has worked. So if we click and drag it into the values box and do a sense check. So we had 480, the prior month was 750. So given that the current month is lower than the previous month, our costs have gone down and it's gone down by 270. So that looks right. Let's do a second cross check. When it comes to the movement between January and February, we had 480 and it increased to 630. So we would expect to see an increase of 150. And that's what we have here. So again, it's all looking good. Deselect the table, then click to put a new waterfall onto the page. And this time again, we want month in category. But in values, we want expense movement. We can now see our full expense movement per month. So this is based on total expenses. I'm going to just quickly tidy up our screen. I'm going to get rid of our old waterfall. I'm going to move our table across slightly. I'm going to quickly just put borders around them as well. You don't have to do this. I just find it easier to view them this way. And then up in my expense movement table, it's not the easiest to see, but there is actually a total. So I'm going to get rid of that again, like we did for income. So in the roller section, we go to the y-axis and scroll down and put show total to off. Okay. As mentioned earlier, we want the user to be able to see the trend in each cost, not just the total cost. So to do that, we're going to put a slicer onto the page. So with no diagrams selected, we just click the slicer. We are going to populate it with income costs. We are then going to rename it by taking out income. Let's just remove costs in the field there. In the paint roller, I want to be able to give them the option to select all. So under selection controls, I'm going to move it from multi-select to select all. Then I'm just going to tidy this up and move it across to the other side and put a border around it. Let's check if that's worked. So if you click select all, the diagram should stay the same. If we unselect and then select, say, electricity, we can see the movement in the electricity, unselect. So that's all our elements there. But let's just have a sense check again. In January, we would expect to see a decrease in costs. We've got it here as minus 270. Here we have got a decrease. The next month we had an increase. So we expect to see an increase, which we do have, and an increase again in March. Now note that the reason that the majority of this movement sits beneath zero is because our first movement was a negative movement. It was a decrease. If it had been an increase, we would have started above the line. So the reason it's below zero is not because it's an expense, it's because of the month-on-month movement. If you look across, you can see that we do go above zero in October, and then November, it brings it back down again. Come December, our movement in our costs has cancelled itself all out to nil. The other thing to note is that we need to think about the user. And typically with costs, a decrease in cost is seen as a good thing. Unless, for example, you're expanding the business, then you might expect the cost to increase. But for this project, we're going to view a decrease in cost as a good thing. But we have a decrease and it's shown as red. I think it should be green for decreases and red for increases. And that's so simple for us to fix. All we need to do is highlight the waterfall table, click on the roller symbol and go down to sentiment colours, and in increase from the drop down select the red, and for the decrease from the drop down select the green. There we go, it's all done for us. That's us finished our project, but I'm just going to make one small tiny change. I would like to see the title up here change as we make a selection across here, rather than it being static. If you'd like to do that, all that we need to do is a very simple title. So we just put a new measure, and into here I'm going to call it title expenses. And I'm going to say it equals, and it's just concatenate X. We bring in our values of finances, income costs, close the bracket, comma. We then have to repeat finance, income costs, we do a comma. Then we want to separate our list of expenses by a comma, hence why we put the comma in that last part of the code. If we select our waterfall again, we go to the title section, and this time we click the FX button, and from the drop down list under finances we just select title expenses and click OK. So now we can see the name of our expenses across the top. This tells us we have all three selected. If you selected just one, we have electricity, we have food, we have insurance. As with most things in Power BI, there are a number of different approaches you could have taken to create this waterfall. Hopefully this gives you an idea of one approach. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you would like to hear more from me, please click the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.